Hello, thank you for inviting us. My name is Elisa Gorin, and I have my colleague Bob Cull here with me. We are planners at PlanSmart New Jersey and are partners in the Together North Jersey project. We're going to go through a very quick but intense presentation, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. There's a lot of information to get through, but our contact information will be at the very end. And so if you have any questions and you need to reach out to us, please do. Just a note, there's also the contact information for another colleague of ours named Scott Fishberg, who has worked on a lot of the maps at Rutgers University. So let's get started. What is Together North Jersey? In 2011, Rutgers was awarded a grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for through the Regional Sustainable Communities Planning Program, and Together North Jersey was born. The purpose of the grant is to orchestrate a regional planning process and develop a regional plan for sustainable development for the 13-county northern New Jersey region, which you can see here on the map. This is actually the NJTPA, the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority's region. That is why it was developed that way. So although Rutgers is the administrative and fiscal agent for the grant, there are many project team partners, including NJTPA, NJ Transit, who are both contributing significant resources to the project through matching funds and also aligning existing programs to leverage additional federal funds for the project. The state's Office of Planning Advocacy and NJDEP are both active participants in the project and are contributing staff time and resources. And we also have our project team, which includes several nonprofit advocacy-based institutions, such as Housing Community Development Network of New Jersey and Building One New Jersey and PlanSmart, RPA, New Jersey Future, and Sustainable Jersey. Membership for Together North Jersey is open to any public jurisdiction, agency or authority, non-governmental organizations, neighborhood associations, sort of anyone who is part of the region and wants to participate is welcome with open arms. So sort of to back up a little, sort of why did we apply for this grant? Why is Together North Jersey necessary? As you're probably all very well aware, we've been experiencing some alarming trends. There's been declining prosperity, there's a high cost of living, changing demographics, and all of these issues that unfortunately don't respect municipal borders and really require a broad and regional approach to address. And so one of the goals of Together North Jersey is to think about all these things locally and regionally and try to get the most out of all the opportunities that exist. And so how will Together North Jersey do this, and what have we been doing so far? We've been undergoing an extensive outreach process, so we've been having tons of public workshops and meetings. We've developed standing committees, which consist of subject matter experts from county and city representatives, private sector, NGOs, state agencies, all to help guide and contribute on a range of topics as part of the plan. We formed partnership groups, as well as developed a website called Engage North Jersey, which is a great online outreach tool. We, at the end of this grant, will have implemented up to 40 local planning projects that are part demonstration projects and part technical assistance. And we're also doing a lot of technical assistance and training. There have been several events this past year, such as health and all policies and crime prevention through environmental design. We're also doing a lot of outreach to various groups and organizations that are doing work relating to this in the state. The goal, sort of at the end of the 3-year grant, is that we'll have this regional plan for sustainable development. And the plan will have a broadly supported vision of goals for the region's future. It will have preferred growth and development scenarios. It will have recommendations to shape public and private investment decisions. And it will also outline strategies that promote place-based economic growth and job creation, and inclusive communities, clean air and water, resilient communities that can recover quickly from disasters, and a lot of important things that we have identified for the region as important elements for sustainability. So the work plan is, there are many moving pieces and everything is happening. A lot of these things are happening at the same time, but as I mentioned earlier, standing committees have been formed to provide input on these 12 different topics. So everything from arts and culture, natural systems, housing, asset-based economic development, to and education, all elements of sustainability that need to be considered when thinking about a regional plan. We're undergoing a scenario planning process. We're developing the Fair Housing and Equity Assessment, which I will discuss in much more detail shortly. We're doing a regional comprehensive economic development strategy, as well as strategy development and action planning for the 12 topics that are listed to the right. So the Regional Fair Housing and Equity Assessment. At all of the regions that have received this grant from HUD are required to do a Fair Housing and Equity Assessment. It is in part HUD's effort to reassess and revise the previous analysis of impediments process, and is largely forming the new rule affirmatively furthering fair housing. And so it's a really important, it's an important sort of exercise in measuring accessibility in our region that will hopefully help to inform future assessments. So what is the Fair Housing and Equity Assessment? It's going to, much like the analysis of impediments, it's going to provide an analysis of segregation, racial and ethnic concentrations of poverty, and explore differences in access to places of high opportunity. And the way that we're defining geographies of high opportunity are places that effectively connect people to good-paying jobs, stable employment, quality public schools, and safe neighborhoods, well-maintained housing, and healthy foods. All pieces of the sustainability plan that we can impact and hope to impact. And so the FHEA will identify and investigate areas of both high and low opportunity. So the study will identify regional spatial patterns and consider whether and to what extent there may be disparities in access to high opportunity for areas, for different groups or populations. So for example, do racial, ethnic minorities or other traditionally disadvantaged populations experience opportunities in a distinct way that differs from the general population or white populations? Are they more isolated, more segregated? So our analysis is ongoing, but it's obviously pretty readily apparent that today in North Jersey, there are neighborhoods of concentrated poverty and segregation, where zip codes not only predict poor minority segregation, but also poor education, employment, and even health outcomes. In their present state, these neighborhoods are not sustainable. And so strategies really must be developed to better connect these communities and their residents to places of opportunity, as well as reinvest in and strengthen existing communities to increase in-place opportunities. Additionally, as part of the study, we will consider the effects of potential influence of infrastructure investment and various policies in place that set priorities for investment. And we will look at the possible regulatory and private market barriers to fair housing choice that enable people to move to areas of opportunity. The development of the Regional Plan for Sustainable Development is following this trajectory of sort of phase one being discovery and asking the question of where are we now and where are we going, the visioning of where do we want to go, and the action planning of how do we get there. And the FHEA is following a similar trajectory of of data analysis of where are we now and what are the baseline conditions, deliberations of where do we want to go and what would be a better scenario, and then decision-making sort of strategies and how do we get there and what needs to be implemented and at what scale to have an impact. Right now we are in the deliberations phase where we're going out and reaching out to different communities and organizations to make sure that we're aligned in the direction that we want to go, and we're gonna ask for input or participation if anyone is available for that. So when we talk about disadvantaged populations, who are we talking about? How are we measuring it? And how are we determining where those regions are? And so as part of our HUD application, we promised to develop a communities of concern mapping that would allow us to coordinate data with the environmental justice analysis conducted by the MPO, the NJTPA, as a means for assessing equity in a variety of different indicators of opportunity. So the way that we have identified communities of concern are areas that are characterized by higher concentrations of minority populations, or higher concentrations of low-income populations, or two or more of other indicators of disadvantage, such as female head of household or persons with limited English proficiency, as you can see on the chart. So we've also done mapping for several other indicators, such as persons with disabilities and non-Hispanic minorities and families in poverty with children. They're not included as part of this map on the right, but are included often by one of these other three indicators. Excuse me. So to sort of understand where areas are higher concentrations than others, is we established a regional average. And so any community that exceeds that regional threshold are shown in orange on this map. And so, as I mentioned earlier, one of the goals is to understand where this opportunity exists and who has access to it. And we spent a lot of time thinking about indicators of opportunity. This is a condensed, abridged list. There are many additional indicators that we've been looking at that have been organized by different themes, such as education, health and environment, poverty, affordable housing, and so on. And so what we'll do is we'll examine how sort of patterns of segregation and integrations of communities of concern have access to these opportunities. So, excuse me. So we expect to map all of these different indicators at the smallest possible geography, so census block group or tract, and at that level we'll be able to see if there are differences in social composition within a community. So that will be useful sort of for planning studies and to see how communities are patterned. But we're also looking at these patterns at the municipal level to compare towns. At that level, we believe that we can focus on some of the program funding opportunities, excuse me, investment decisions, and differences in available resources that are more often tracked at that broader geographic level. So for the purpose of this presentation, where I'm just picking one indicator, so I'm going to go through the housing affordability theme of access. So on the map here, you can see that we've mapped multifamily units in the region. As I said earlier, we developed sort of a regional threshold that indicates the typical value for the region, and areas that exceed that threshold are highlighted in progressively higher shades of orange. So in this map, you'll see the locations of multifamily housing units as individual points and also as part of an average. The regional threshold for multifamily housing has been determined to be 5.9 units per 1,000 people. So our next step would be to think about how does this relate to communities of concern. So I have both maps up here for you to see, so you can see where the communities of concern exist on the right and where the multifamily units on the left. So that's sort of a geographic portrayal of it, but when we actually run the numbers, so to speak, it becomes pretty clear that in low-income communities there are 12.8 multifamily units per 1,000 people compared to the 5.9 region-wide threshold. So communities that are high minority, low income, and communities of concern have a lot more multifamily dwelling units, and communities that are non-high minority, non-low income, non-communities of concern don't have access to don't have opportunities for multifamily dwelling units. So people don't have access to these opportunities if they want to locate in areas of non-high minority, non-low income. And so we can see this pattern sort of play out through some of these different indicators, such as public housing. This map shows the public housing units as well as the units per 1,000 people, excuse me. As you can see, they're sort of clustered in some of the urban areas of the region. And when we run the numbers, we see that in low-income communities, there are 12.5 public housing units per 1,000 people compared to 4.7 region-wide. And as you can see, non-high minority and non-low-income and non-communities of concern have a much lower availability of public housing. And so the same goes to the low-income housing tax credits. As you can see, here's a distribution of them throughout the region, and where the concentrations are in the urban areas, and the breakdown of how many. There are 4.8 low-income housing tax credit units per 1,000 people in low-income communities versus 2.3 region-wide. So we keep sort of seeing the same pattern, and the same could be said of the foreclosures. The regional threshold here is 31.7 for foreclosures per square mile, and 84% of people living in low-income communities live in places that meet or exceed the regional threshold for foreclosures per square mile, compared to 44% region-wide. So there's a greater burden on communities of concern in terms of foreclosure impacts. As I mentioned earlier, there are many additional indicators within this theme that we are looking at and are thinking about. Some of them are listed here, and there are more. A lot of it depends on data that we're able to get and data that we really think will be able to capture the conditions on the ground accurately. As I mentioned earlier, another important element of the Fair Housing and Equity Assessment is analyzing patterns of investment and fair housing compliance. So in terms of public investment, we want to sort of answer the question of how are public investments impacting access to opportunity in the region? Are they reinforcing certain patterns of segregation? Are they doing something to mitigate those impacts? So we're going to sort of look at investment programs by theme, so education and transportation, housing, and analyze programs within each of those buckets to see what impacts they're having on the region, and hopefully we'll be able to develop, definitely we'll be able to develop recommendations for program design and selection criteria for future programs going forward, and how investments are distributed through the region. We're also going to spend a lot of time looking at the fair housing landscape and our compliance with the Fair Housing Act of 1968. We're going to look at historical barriers to affordable housing and to fair housing in the region, as well as efforts to address them. We're going to look at access and mobility opportunities in the region, and we're also going to develop recommendations that are both program and policy related for the Regional Plan for Sustainable Development and relating to fair housing compliance. And that's it. Thank you very much for participating, and as promised, here is our contact information. If you want to reach out or you have any questions, please do so, and thank you very much.